What is the weather in mid-Ohio right now?
Ken, you're going to have to answer that because I've been in my basement all day long.
Nice.
It's pretty nice outside right now. I mean, it was cold last night. It was last night. It probably got down to 40, but right now it's probably mid 60s, so it's comfortable.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Sunny.
So now, Jason, not Fogelson, are you in Raymond, Ohio?
I actually am at my residence in Dublin,
No, but
Ohio,
I mean,
which is about, my office?
Yeah.
Yeah. Our office is about a mile down the street from the manufacturing facility that Ken works at.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm at R&D, and Ken's at MAP manufacturing plant. So we get to see each other quite a bit.
Really?
I can be in his office in 5 minutes.
Do you drive a TLX to get there?
Of course.
Absolutely.
So are you guys doing a lot of Zoom meetings?
Right now we're moving from Skype to Teams when we aren't face to face in the office. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But there have been a few Zooms, but we're actually moving towards Teams for our corporate.
Yeah, no, I shouldn't have used Zoom. I should have just said online. It's like Kleenex and Xerox and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you were to say to somebody, we do Teams meetings, they're going to like, football? I mean.
Hey, there we go. This is Autoline After Hours with John McElroy and Gary Vasilash, episode 528 for October 8th of 2020. Acura completely re-engineers the TLX. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Hey, Gary.
John, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. You too?
Yeah, this is going to be a good show. It's about the TLX that you've driven it. I've driven it. It's a very interesting car.
Yeah, but what?
But I've got to ask you what happened today in 1917.
Today in 1917, and what's today? October 8th.
October 8th, and actually it's sort of interesting because a couple of weeks ago this company had a vehicle that I brought up.
I give.
Katie, give him a clue.
Is this a Fogelson tractor?
Exactly. Today was the day in 1917 that the 20 horsepower, 4-cylinder engined Fogelson tractor was introduced.
Wow. I wonder where that plant is. That wasn't Highland Park, was it?
No, I think it was earlier than that. But this is a very special day because there was another one that I discovered that this happened in 2005 on this day, and it's more significant in terms of stuff that we sort of talk about nowadays. And I want you to sort of guess, and it has something to do with a desert.
Oh, so could this have been the DARPA challenge out in the desert?
Brilliant. Katie, bring that one up. So this is actually not the vehicle that won. This is Junior, which is the brother of Stanley, which basically looked like that, the Volkswagen Touareg, which won the DARPA challenge in 2005. It went 150 miles across the desert and won a $2 million prize. And this was done by Stanford University, and Sebastian Thune, who then went on to fame at Google and elsewhere, was the guy who was in charge of that team.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That I tell you, that DARPA challenge pulled autonomous technology forward, by my estimation, at least 20 years. It was a breakthrough event in terms of autonomous history.
Absolutely. And all the things that we talk about nowadays, I mean, we just go back to 2005. I mean, it almost seems like that Fordson tractor. It's so far in the past. But anyway, we should move on with the show.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's bring in Jason Fogelson. He's joining us today.
Hey.
Hey, he's in the review garage.
That's right.
Jason, great to have you back on the show.
Thank you. Always good to be here.
Anything new in your world?
Well, I got a chance to drive the TLX as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that from Jason and his team.
Perfect.
In fact, why don't we bring them in right now? We've got Jason Ray, the principal engineer on the Acura TLX, as well as Ken Sheridan. He's the assistant chief engineer, works on the manufacturing end of it all. And good to have the both of you guys here.
Good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Oh, did we lose Ken there a minute? Looks like it. Well,
No, he'll come back. But
okay.
so Jason, you were at the very beginning of this program. So this is an all new TLX. How did you guys go about developing it? I mean, where did the ideas come from? What were you benchmarking? What were you looking at? What were you trying to accomplish?
Okay, great question for a start. So it seems like 10 years ago now, but it was about 5 years ago that this all started. And that's when we first formed our team. So I'm the principal development lead. I have a counterpart who's the design lead. And then we have an overall chief engineer who's above everything. So we pull our whole team together and we have these team kickoffs where we buy or rent all of our competitor vehicles and drive them against our current model. So at that particular event, we drove from Los Angeles with all of our vehicles, competitors being the 3 Series, the A4, and the C300 class, as well as knowing we were coming out with the Type S. They're one step up competitors. So the 340, the C3 450 at the time, or the Benz C450 AMG at the time, and of course the S4. So we spent quite a bit of time driving through actually the Palomar Mountains. We took the long route from LA to San Diego, and we had a lot of discussion on the merits of the competitors, what our strengths and weaknesses are, and where we could have something that we would improve on with our product. And I think the key thing that came out of that event over 1 week was the fact that the competition is extremely strong. Those are strong cars. And we know that we needed to stand out and we needed to be very highly emotional. So we actually formed our team concept at that time. It was the 7-second knockout, with the idea that we only get one chance to make a first impression. And from every aspect of the shopping process that the customer would go through, it had to be high emotion. So the first time they see the car, they have to want to go look inside the car. The first time they look inside the car, they have to get in it, and then finally they have to drive, and that's where the deal is sealed. So you're looking right now at the styling. I think with this angle, you can see that we focused very heavily on the proportion. The overall length is about 8 inches larger than the current vehicle from our dash to axle. So what that does is create this long hood that gives the impression of power. And then next we focused very heavily on the rear to give it these haunches, or what we called shoulders, to again give it this muscular look. So at a glance, this car looks like it could be class above our actual competitors, but it gives that feeling of a performance vehicle that we want. And that's quite a bit of the feedback we've heard so far, is that we kind of nailed it from that perspective. So we're very excited about that.
Yeah, Ken, let's get you in on the discussion too. You're on the manufacturing end. How much do you work hand in glove with the engineers as they develop it? I mean, are you throwing ideas at them, they at you? How does that work so that it's not just them throwing the design over the wall and say, okay, figure out how to make it?
Yeah, so that's what happened with us. We were excited with this one because we really wanted to go after what Jason talked about, this precision crafted performance. So if you look at the styling lines on the hood, it has a first time applied sharp edge technology for us. So we were able to take advantage of some of our equipment that we have in-house. So we have a high tonnage stamping servo press that we can start getting into stamping these complex shapes onto that sharp edge hood. Or this is the first time in our factory that we've been able to do aluminum fenders with some of those complex shapes. Or if you look at the back of the car has those really deep hips that come out. So this is the deepest drawn SPO that we've ever done in high volume manufacturing. So back to your question, when you talk about, usually when you get to that clay model of those first concepts of the kind of stuff that Jason's dreaming about, a lot of times the manufacturing side has to push back and say, we can't do that. But in this case, we were actually able to take advantage of some of these weld equipment that we have in-house or stamping equipment that we have in-house and really collaborate as one team and deliver that concept that Jason and his team kind of dreamed about.
Ken, a follow-up on that then, Honda has historically avoided deep draws because it slows your press line down. Instead of running, 18, 20 strokes a minute, you're probably running 12 strokes a minute or something like that. What was the thinking behind changing that philosophy, going more for styling, even at the sacrifice of manufacturing efficiency?
I think we have to do that because in the automotive industry, the way that we're kind of turning right now, the sedan or the car market sales continue to be more competitive or shrink, and the SUV sales continue to go up. So we have to come up with a car that looks different than the other cars that we have. We really need to get that 7-second knockout or that wow factor when you first see this car. So in order to do that, we really got to go after those deep styling lines, and we really got to try to make an impression.
So how did the welding change the way the car looks?
The welding for us is quite a bit different from the current TLX. So the first thing that we're actually able to do with this car, which is exciting, is we actually have the bulkhead itself is open, so the associates can actually walk in there and do a easily process. But from a welding standpoint, we went to an inner frame structure. So our concept is high accuracy body, a really solid or square foundation. And then we brought in for the first time inner frame structure, which is basically making more parts in offline cell comps. And then we have additional robots that hold the car together instead of traditional exclusive weld equipment. And then when we spot weld the cars together, the cabin, it's actually more accurate and it's more flexible. And then we were able to take advantage of this car. If you look at the top of the car, you see there's no roof molds on there. So we applied the same thing that we have on our Honda Accord, which is that laser braze surface on the top. So it's a really clean, crisp line. And the strength of that weld braze itself is actually stronger than if we didn't braze the car, put the side panel and the roof together. So we have inner frame technology, we have laser braze technology, we have it's the first time apply for high performance adhesive as well to help with some of the overall stiffness or structure of the vehicle.
And you mentioned Accord here. Is there any platform sharing with Accord, or is this a totally new platform?
It's basically completely new.
Yeah, completely new platform, focused exactly on the TLX and the Type S.
Jason, I'm interested to hear you say that it's actually 8 inches longer. That would almost imply it's a heavier car, a bigger car, but I got to drive 2 different versions today, one of them being the A-SPEC. And the thing that hit me instantly about driving the car is it feels very light, especially in the steering. I don't mean inaccurate. It feels terrific. It's a very nimble feeling car. So if you made it longer, what have you done from a mass standpoint, or what am I feeling when I think that this thing just feels so light?
Well, I'm happy to hear you say what you just did. That brings me some love after 5 years of this. The actual car overall length is about 3 inches. What I was focusing on when I said 8 inches was the actual dashboard to the front axle to give the hood the increase in length. So the overall car only grew about 3 inches from the outgoing model. But even with that said, you're right. We did have a bit of weight penalty because of the size of the vehicle that we wanted to use for this standout styling and our proportions. So the three areas we focused on for weight distribution, Ken kind of touched on a little bit, but the fenders saved us some weight. And then we applied cast aluminum front dampers to attach our double wishbone front suspension, which is also huge for the handling you just described. And then another key item that we worked closely with manufacturing side was to move our battery to the trunk for our first time. So that gave an improved weight distribution, moving us from 60-40 to 57-63, or 57-43, I'm sorry. But the feeling that you just described was a huge focus point for us from the very beginning drive that I explained. We wanted the car to have this very, very quick and agile feeling, but still maintain that higher speed feeling of stability. So to do that, we applied a belt-driven higher capacity steering EPS, and we paired that with a VGR. So our variable gear ratio is actually about 22% quicker than our outgoing model in the low to mid speed range, and about 15% quicker off center with more, or I'm sorry, on center for that highway stability feeling. So overall, that allowed us to achieve the best of both worlds. And we're actually using that longer wheelbase to allow that on center higher speed steering, because that still gives us the ability to tune in the stability that we want and need. But yeah, that our overall goal was to make this car drive very small, and I'm happy to hear your comments.
Yeah, I like the outgoing model a lot. This one definitely is a step above it.
Is the new model wider and lower, or is it just longer?
It is wider and it's lower by about an inch, and that was another thing that was helped out by our double wishbone over the strut. So we clearly applied the double wishbone because we knew with a new platform we wanted to have the ability to have Type S levels of limit performance, and double wishbone clearly is the way to go there over a strut. But also from a styling standpoint, that allowed us to lower that hood by about an inch, or half an inch to an inch.
It's so good to hear the word double wishbone suspension. Believe me, that's really good. Hey, Ken, I got a question. One of the people at Acura was saying, ask them about how they aligned all the front end stuff. And I don't mean front end alignment of the tires and wheels. Apparently you've got some sort of tool that just goes over the front end to massage the fascia, the hood, the lamps, all that stuff. Take it up from there. What were they telling me to ask you about?
Yeah, so we talked about the high accuracy body, and if you think about the front of the car, when you look at the car's personality or the smile is the front fascia when you look at it. So our focus was on the front fascia. So if you start with our big white body suppliers, from a stamped perspective, when they make comps for us, they use common datum points when they build these comps, and they put them together, and then they measure the parts, and then they give them to us. And then we brought those parts in along with the suppliers in our metrology lab before each build. And then we would locate those common datum points to the exact same points that our in-house weld equipment is going to hold the car to put it together. So we're focusing on really the parts of the car that mate up together. If you think about a puzzle, maybe the corner piece of a puzzle, you don't care so much about the outside lines, but those matching surfaces have to be perfect. So we would use common datum points as we built the car in each cell, and we'd measure it. But then we'd actually use special, I talked about that open bulkhead. An open bulkhead for the assembly associates to be able to get in and out of the car is kind of their dream, because they can get really close to the firewall.
Wait, explain that a little bit more. For those in the audience who aren't sure exactly what you're talking about, what is the bulkhead of the car? And then pick it up from there, why that's an advantage for the associates on the line.
Can you go back to that picture that you were just displaying a second ago of that white body that we were, yeah, this one here. So if you look at the front of the car there, you see a left and a front outrigger on both sides, a side frame. So the associate can walk right into that engine room. And if you think about all the components that they have to assemble when they put that car together, they want to be really close to it from an ergonomic standpoint. We want their process to be easy. If their process is easy, the quality is very repeatable, and it's very ergonomically friendly or safe. But from a weld perspective or an accuracy perspective, if you think about the open end of the car not being closed together there, is you take that body from weld and you put it through, especially our really hot ovens, our E-coat ovens at 450 degrees, the steel parts start moving around. So we got to be able to bring all those parts back together when we put the car back together with exclusive fixtures to basically get that front end fascia back to where we want it. So there were some special fixtures and jigs in our paint shop when we went through the oven, as well in our assembly process to really get what you're seeing on the front of the car, like a perfect fit and finish.
Is this the first time you've done something like this?
No, we've kind of been going after this open bulkhead concept. We started it. We've done it on CRV. We've done it on Accord. We've never done it on an Acura model yet, so this is the first time for Acura. But it just makes the process a lot more ergonomically friendly and consistent. And then it makes somebody like me that even I could do the job easily then if it's easy to do, and I'm not having to reach all the way over the top of the car.
Hey, we got to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back in just a second, but first a shout out to our good friends at Borg Warner.
The world is changing at an ever-increasing pace. No matter what the mode of transportation, there is always the need for an efficient propulsion system. And that's exactly what Borg Warner has been doing since the earliest days of the automotive industry. We create innovative mobility technologies that reduce energy consumption and emissions while improving performance. Our proven track record has made us an industry leader in forward-looking propulsion solutions for combustion, hybrid, and electric vehicles.
All right, we're back talking all about the new Acura TLX with Jason Ray and Ken Sheridan.
So we talked about those two outriggers. Tell us what goes in there after the car is being put together. What powers this?
You want to talk about that, Jason?
Oh, are you talking about the powertrain?
Engine?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So this model that we're launching right now will have our 2-liter turbo engine, which is first applied to our RDX, and it's received some very good feedback. The actual 4-cylinder turbo was meant to replace the outgoing V6. But in terms of actual power delivery, it has about 26 foot-pounds of torque from the lower RPM. So it's a pretty big increase over our outgoing V6. And for our current 4-cylinder customers, it's a huge increase of about 90% low-end torque. So this will feel like a completely different vehicle to them. And that has made it up similar to the RDX, same as the RDX with our Acura specific 10AT transmission. So we feel that combination will have a very much improved feeling of overall performance over the outgoing models with the 9-speed transmission.
So you've gone from 2 powertrains to a single powertrain.
Correct. At this launch. Also, I've alluded to the Type S, and we have shared information that will be our exclusive Acura 3-liter V6 turbo engine, which we're not here to discuss today, but
right.
It had a lot to do with what we did when we built up and planned for this model.
So you guys actually engineered this model to be able to take the forces related to the Type S model, sort of beefing it up, as it were.
Correct. Yeah. Basically all body rigidity and chassis architecture was built in addition to brakes, tire, suspension. Everything had the mindset of how the Type S and what the Type S would need to perform at its limit. So basically our base or 4-cylinder variation of this gets the benefit of what we've done to achieve this return of the Type S, which we're all very excited about.
You know what excited me about this vehicle, and I know everybody loves driving cars. I love listening to music in cars. And I mean, the sound system, the ELS Studio 3D sound system in the top trim levels, I find it's one of the best I've ever heard. It's really incredible.
Yeah, that's exciting to hear. I'm not sure if it was you, Jason, but somebody came back in our Novi press release and actually said they'd spend $40,000 if it was just a box with that stereo system in it. So it was kind of an interesting comment, but yeah, it is quite a great stereo system.
Ken, talk a little bit about, different materials that are used in this car. I think Jason alluded to it earlier. You've got cast aluminum shock towers. What kind of challenges does that pose from a manufacturing standpoint? When we look under the hood of the car, everything's nice and bolted together, and it's just logical that it should all be there. But I got to believe that this mix of materials is probably a little bit more challenging than many people would realize.
Yeah, I mean, specifically the cast aluminum damper housings, those are done by a supplier. Those aren't done in-house, the die casting of those. And then they self-pierce, rivet them to bigger areas of the car that are comps. And then we bring those in, and then we weld them together with our weld equipment. But really, we haven't, I mean, with that new technology there, we really haven't had any spikes or any hiccups with it. It's been a really good delivery from the supplier, and it's been really well received by our process in-house as far as putting the car together from an accuracy standpoint as well.
And then Jason Ray, I imagine you went with these cast aluminum shock towers just for that much more rigidity in the front end.
Yeah, the whole vehicle had a huge focus on rigidity. We've applied the all-wheel drive center tunnel basically to all variations, even the front wheel drive variations. So that's basically creating a backbone to our vehicle that connects to the ultra rigid front dash and the cast aluminum damper mounts, and then connects out to the rear stiffener ring. So the overall achievement is about 50% improvement in global torsional rigidity, and a huge focus on all of the suspension attachment points. So we can remove the disturbance from the road and focus on letting the suspension do its job. So it's actually the highest performance body rigidity ever applied to an Acura sedan, basically second obviously to the NSX, which is not a sedan. So the rigidity is something that you can feel, I think, very clearly when you drive the car.
You mentioned all-wheel drive, so this has the super handling all-wheel drive. Explain what that does compared to non-super handling all-wheel drive.
Correct. So basically it's our Gen 4 super handling all-wheel drive. So what we're capable of doing with our Acura SH all-wheel drive is to redistribute the torque from the front to the rear wheels. And then between those rear wheels, we can send torque to the right or left. So the big advantage over this Gen 4 system is that we can send up to 70% of our available torque to the rear of the vehicle and up to 100% to the right or left of each wheel. So basically, if you're going around a turn, let's say you're taking a right-hand turn and you go on throttle, it will actually send power to the rear outboard left wheel to actually bring the rear end of the car around and help you maintain the perfect line around that corner. So it's absolutely amazing in a track situation, but also it can be pretty fun around roundabouts and in general spirited driving.
Yeah, I always find that it's handy. Torque vectoring, when it's executed well, is also handy in when you're starting up from a standstill and taking a turn, say, going right onto a busy road. You know that you're going to have the control that you need, and you're not going to be spinning out.
Yeah, it'll help with the grip. It'll help reduce any understeer where you'd push straight, but obviously we do tune it where it won't have oversteer, which could be dangerous. We could dial that in for some fun, but we try to keep people heading in the direction they're actually pointing in.
So when you guys were developing this car, I mean, how much of it was a focus on performance and how much of it was a focus on luxury or premiumness?
That's a great question, actually, because you can push too far in one direction. And basically that came down to, we know we're in a luxury vehicle segment, so we didn't want to push too hard where we want to be sporty and your teeth are rattling when you hit bumps. So that had quite a bit to do with our suspension choice. So for our advanced grade and for our future Type S, we've applied sensor active dampers. So that advanced grade vehicle is actually tuned a little bit more to have very clear separation in each of the modes, but overall to have more of a comfort based feeling. Now for our A-SPEC and our tech grades, we've applied the same amplitude reactive damper that's on the outgoing model. But personally, I drive that outgoing model every day and I worked on that project, so I don't want to say anything negative, but it's a bit softer than we wanted. So in this vehicle, we've tuned those dampers to maintain a good ride quality, but have a more connected feel to the road. So they're kind of biased towards a little bit sportier feel. So I'm not sure what versions. I think Gary and Jason, you got a chance to drive both the advanced and the A-SPEC. So I
Yes.
think you could probably speak to the very clear difference in character.
Mhm.
And that's
Absolutely.
meant exactly to do what you just asked and make sure that we have this luxury feeling or option and more of a sporty feeling or option with our sportier vehicle like the A-SPEC.
Yeah, and you can also dial it in with the drive modes.
Correct.
Jason,
And that's-
talk a little bit more about the A-SPEC, because I did drive both versions today. My own natural preferences were for the A-SPEC. What was I feeling there? What have you done with that car?
Well, that's my preference too. That basically the whole return to precision crafted performance is something we wanted to stress. And ever since we reintroduced the A-SPEC in the 18 model, it's been extremely well received. So with everything we tried to do with any of our tuning, we wanted the character of the drive to match the character that you'd expect when you see the car. So A-SPEC looks quite a bit more sporty than, let's say, the advanced trim, and that's fine. It's a different customer. So what we've done there is it has the same steering ratio as the advanced grade, but with that damper setting, we've tuned it again to be more towards the sporty end. Basically, we pushed it as far as we could for connection to the road, but without pushing too far where it would be nervous feeling or a ride that's considered not luxurious. There's a balance point in the line that you don't want to cross there.
Ken, you mentioned in passing that you're using adhesives on this vehicle. Where are you using them and what do they do for you?
Yeah, so it's one of the new things that we brought in with our weld technology. So it's something that we actually started with. If you talk about we call it characteristic or capability in our weld shop, we actually brought it in with the 18 model Accord, where we started using these high performance adhesives along the floors and some of the comps as we put them together. So we have robots with that capability that we never had on TLX that we've applied to this. And then that makes the whole floor of the car more rigid. And it gets back into that new platform, that rigidity that we're really trying to position this car for that Type S engine.
So it's adhesive and welding. It's not just one or the other?
No, we're doing both. So we actually putting adhesives on this car for the first time, and then we're actually putting additional welds too. So some of our welds, especially like in the door areas, we've gone to even a shorter pitch welding. So we're putting more welds on the car. We're putting adhesives on the car, and it's given that overall stiff road handling feeling that Jason is describing.
Mm-hmm.
Real good. Well, look, we really appreciate you guys coming on and talking all about the Acura TLX. It's very interesting to get both the engineering and the manufacturing side of what went on there. So Jason Ray, Ken Sheridan, thanks so much you guys for having come on.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think the three of us all enjoyed driving those vehicles. So nice job.
That's right.
Music to my ears.
We're very excited. Thank you guys for having us.
Thanks a lot.
Real good. We're going to take another quick commercial break here. I know Gary's got a lot of items in the news that we're going to be talking about. But first, a shout out to our good friends at Bridgestone. All right, we're back.
Okay, we are. So John, I'm trying to remember if I have this right, but when you were at CES, seems like a million years ago, you did a ride along with Karsten Breitfeld.
Right.
And was he with Faraday at the time, or was he still with Byton?
He was with Faraday
Okay.
at the time.
I thought that was, and so I read that.
Oh, wait. No. Now I'm trying to remember. No, I believe he was with Byton at the time.
He was with Byton at the time?
Yeah.
Because now he's at Faraday, and it was announced this week, and he announced this week that Faraday is going to be doing, getting together with one of these blank checkbook companies, a SPAC, in order to, monetize the company, which is certainly had some problems over the past few years, to put it mildly. So Jason, I mean, you see a company like Byton, and then you see a company like Faraday Future. I've talked to Carson. I'm sure Carson, you've talked to him as well. Smart man, knows his stuff. But are these companies real? I mean, are these companies that we're actually going to be seeing product from?
I'm very skeptical about Byton. Well, Byton's gone, so you don't have to be skeptical about it anymore. And I've been skeptical about Faraday for the longest time. And I'll be honest with you, I had to look up what a SPAC was, Special Purpose Acquisition Company. It seems to me like a bit of sleight of hand when it comes to fundraising. And that's been their problem all along is, so little product, so much fundraising. And I mean, they've gone through reportedly $2 billion or more at this point, and without a car to show for it. So I think that this is a way for investors to make money and stockholders to speculate. But I'm not sure that we're ever going to see a car that we get to drive.
What do you think, John?
Well, look, Jason nailed it. It's the problem that every startup faces, especially if they're an automotive startup. You burn through amazing amounts of cash. You got to be constantly raising money. And, the only one who's been able to do it so far has been Tesla, because as we've talked about so many times on the show, Elon Musk has an amazing ability to raise money. Even though Tesla lost money for 10 years straight, he was still able to raise money. I don't think anybody else in the automotive world is able to do that. So they're turning to these reverse mergers, the SPAC companies, and they're trying to take advantage of this stock market mania that's going on right now with anything to do with electric cars. And they're hoping that they can raise a bunch of money and get through this all. It's especially hard for EV startups in the US or Europe, not so much in China, as long as they're tied to some sort of state entity, a city or a province or what have you, that needs the jobs, and they keep shoveling cash into these companies to keep them going. But it's really hard to do.
See, I don't want to be naive about this whole thing, but okay. And we've talked about the fact that, okay, developing an electric vehicle is a whole lot simpler than developing a TLX. I mean, these guys have all kinds of things to deal with in terms of the powertrain and the suspension, right? And here we have a much simpler proposition. So it seemed to me to be, easier for them to do this. And, a lot of the, if we look at the traditional auto companies, they basically have an installed base, right? I mean, they have assembly plants, they have powertrain plants, they have the paint shops, they have everything. But if you were starting up a company right now, John, you would probably say, well, I'm going to do some things, but I'm not going to do everything. And the other things will be done by a supplier. And there are plenty of suppliers out there that are going, yeah, we're ready to take this business, So I'm like mystified as to why these guys are like congressmen or something, just constantly raising money. I mean, it's just like not doing anything, just raising money for what?
Yeah, no, for what? And, the problem is they all want to be big time car companies right out of the box. And so they go and build these $1 billion or more assembly plants, manufacturing operations. And I often come back, I've said it on the show before too. I love what Larry Burns, the former head of R&D at General Motors, used to say about startups. 3 rules: start small, think big, move fast. And all these startups forget the start small part of the equation. So they go out and they raise $1 billion, or at least they start spending $1 billion on a brand new greenfield assembly plant. That's not the right way to do it, in my opinion. The right way to do it is go find a giant warehouse that's empty. Don't go spend a whole bunch of money building bricks and mortar. There's plenty of big empty buildings out there. To your point, Gary, suppliers can do a lot for you. Get your feet wet, test the market, learn how to do things. And then once you start making money, then start thinking about your brand new $1 billion plant and start taking all these things in-house. I mean, not even Tesla started out as vertically integrated as it's become. They did it the smart way. They did it over a period of time. This is one thing that I like about Henrik Fisker. He's looking to outsource just about everything. I think it's a smart strategy for a startup. And so these others that are building these $1 billion Taj Mahal assembly plants are probably not going to make it.
John, the amazing thing about this company, about Faraday Future, they're not building an assembly plant. They're building the first examples in Hanford, California, where they have a small facility, and they're going to build this in China anyway. So what are they spending all this money on? I don't get it.
So Jason, you spent time writing about these companies and talking to these people. I mean, so the question to you, going back to John's point about they're not understanding the start small, think big, go fast. Well, I mean, what's these guys?
If I could answer that, I think I'd know where to invest my money, but I don't have a dime in electric car companies at all, and I'm going to keep it that way.
So you're not optimistic about these startups then?
No, especially when their competition is not just Tesla right now, but their competition is coming online at General Motors, at Ford, and Volvo, and other companies that are just much more experienced at mass production. So it's not how can we do what Tesla did. It's how can we get there before these other companies with way more assets figure it out.
So that sort of leads to a point. You mentioned the traditional car companies that are getting it, in this space or getting into this space, and I thought it was rather interesting this week when Mercedes came out and announced that they seem to be like pushing all of their chips into, I mean, not merely electrified vehicles, not merely hybrid vehicles, but full battery electric vehicles. I mean, lots of them, saying that they'll have 5 EVs by next year. They have 2 now. And they'll have 20 plug-in hybrids. And then in 2025, they'll have 10 EVs and 25 plug-in hybrids. And that's just where it's starting. And they're just going to go more and more and more. I mean, who wants these things?
Well, that's a really good question, and time will tell. I think that once again, there are a lot of things said about plans in the EV space that get adjusted as realities come to bear. And I think that Mercedes is very good at making big pronouncements and then scaling back a bit, because they've talked about this before. I'm optimistic that they're in a country, they're based in Germany, where there's a real genuine support for green technologies and for alternate fuels. So I don't think that their support is going to evaporate there. The question I think you rightly ask is who's going to buy them once they're built.
Yeah, look,
I guess you were waiting for me to answer that question, but I can't.
Look, there's no question that sales of electric cars are going to increase. It's not that the ICE is dead, but it is a dead end. I mean, we know long-term, there's not going to be much of a future for it. Probably a decade or 2 out, but it's a dead end. Mercedes, like everybody else, is realizing we better get on the bandwagon right now. I mean, they announced their EQS, 2 years ago? It's not on sale yet, right? And now, or EQC, now they're coming out with the sedan. That's the EQS. I think I got that right.
The S-Class version with
Right. I mean,
plenty of battery
They say
space.
2021.
yeah.
But-
Okay. That they're slow to the party. I mean, they had that ACAT class electric, which was just a compliance car. I mean, it was just to try to get them some EV credits, both here and in Europe. It's really kind of shocking for a company that touts its engineering to be so far behind when it comes to this new technology. So, for example, it's only with the new S-Class that they have full over-the-air update capability. Nothing else in their lineup has got that. And so, for a company that touts how good its engineering is, it's way behind the eight ball. It's behind General Motors and Ford in this regard, from an OTA capability. And of course, Tesla's been out in front of everybody by a decade. And so for Mercedes not to have a clean sheet electric out on the market right now, when Porsche does, when BMW does, when Audi does, when Jaguar does, is really something of a shock. And then they came up with this measly mouth excuse of, oh, there's a shortage of batteries and we can't bring it out, whereas everybody else is coming out with electrics. So, but to me, Gary, the real news that came out of this announcement a day ago, they want to cut their R&D costs. So at the same time, they're pouring all this money into this new technology, both connectivity and battery electric. They want to cut their R&D by some 20%. To me, that's a shocking revelation. And it would suggest that the company is looking ahead in the next couple of years and seeing nothing but trouble unless it starts taking an axe to its costs right now.
And that was they're trying to reduce all of their overhead costs. So it wasn't just like they were focusing on R&D.
Correct. But it makes me wonder too, can they stay in Formula One? I mean, the reason Honda dropped out of Formula One is because its F1 efforts were funded right out of its R&D budget. Whereas you got to wonder if Mercedes is going to stick in Formula One. And I know they said they are, but when you look at this massive cost-cutting announcement that they just had this week, I got to wonder if they can justify pouring it's got to be big bucks. It's probably a couple of $100 million that could easily be applied to electric R&D instead of racing.
I have a
That would
feeling
be such a disaster for F1.
Yeah. And I have a feeling when people cut these budgets, they don't say, "Oh, now we have this money and we can put it over here." It's no, it's gone. It's off the books. It's not going to be carried anymore. But I thought it was interesting. I think it was last week's show, John, that we talked about how Volkswagen is using the MEB platform for its new lineup of electric vehicles, the ID4, the ID3, and so on. And so a platform specifically engineered for electric vehicles and electric vehicles only to optimize what an electric vehicle needs. And Mercedes announced the MMA, the Mercedes Modular Architecture, which will be the underpinnings for electric vehicles, but it will also be capable of accommodating an internal combustion engine. That sort of seems to me like, on the one hand, they're saying, oh, we're going to have all these electric vehicles. But on the other hand, they're saying, maybe we ought to hedge some of those bets.
Yeah, I think it's a big mistake. I think Tesla has taught the industry that if you want to build an electric car that people will stand in line to buy, it's got to be a clean sheet, dedicated electric vehicle platform. Whole hog. Don't go for any compromises. Same goes on the manufacturing end, although Mercedes claims with its new SCAT class plant, it's improved assembly efficiency by 20%, even though there will be a full battery variant on that vehicle as well. But yeah, I think you're right, Gary. I think they're afraid to pull the trigger and go whole hog. They're trying to justify that they're going to have investment efficiency by being able to do one vehicle that can have an ICE, a plug-in hybrid, or a full battery in it. And like I said at the beginning, I think Tesla has taught the world that's not the way to do it.
I think there's another step in the development of battery electric vehicles that we haven't seen yet. And that's really, when you talk about a clean sheet design, I think that someone somewhere is going to come up with a true clean sheet design that rethinks how an automobile is configured. Because when you look at an electric car now, there's so much leg design that that just has nothing to do with works anymore. And I think once someone gets the idea about how to get rid of that legacy design stuff, we'll be talking about when electric cars really take off.
So Jason, are you suggesting that like the overall shape of the vehicle, that we look at this and it doesn't look like a 3-box design or a 2-box design like a CUV?
Exactly. And part of that, you know, they're starting to do that with the skateboard architecture by moving the batteries low and having them be, in essence, the platform for the vehicle. But nobody's rethought that box up at the front that we call the hood, which has become a legacy design element. You know, there's certain safety advantages to having something between you and the front of the car, but like let's throw out all these assumptions about how you have to lay out your vehicle and come up with something that's truly innovative.
Well, you know, what we need for that is hub motors. And hub motors could conceivably get rid of the brakes and even get rid of the steering. And, you know, you could do that mode that Rivian showed with its truck, you know, where the left wheels are turning in one direction, the right-hand side wheels turning in another, and the thing could just turn on its own wheelbase, you know, much like a tank can with its tracks. Mm-hmm. But if you went with hub motors, you start to get the architectural freedom that you're talking about. I'm not so sure yet getting rid of the nose of a car, because as you pointed out, Jason, you need that crush space. But somewhere deep in this century, where we've got truly full autonomy and we've got Toyota, what Toyota refers to as its guardian suite of technology, where you may still be the driver, but the car will never let you crash into something. When we have vehicle-to-vehicle connectivity, so if two cars realize they're going to crash, one can slow down for 3 seconds, let the other one pass. There's never an accident. Once we get to that level of technology, you can do whatever the hell you want from a design standpoint.
Okay, but to go back to the aforementioned Larry Burns, as you may recall, when he introduced the Autonomy, which was the first skateboard. Now, he did have hub motors in that vehicle, but that was a fuel cell rather than a battery electric vehicle. But one of the things that he had said when they introduced that was all of the crash structure is built into the platform. So you wouldn't need that front piece that now everybody's turning into a frunk. Okay, so it would just all be within the underlying structure that would take that. And Jason, I think that one of the problems though is that, okay, if you're a company, whether it's a Mercedes or Faraday Future or, you know, fill in the blank, that is going to be making electric vehicles, if you made something that didn't look like a car, don't you risk putting people off saying, gee, first of all, I'm going to be trying a new technology because I'm going to be plugging this in and not filling it with fuel. And then secondly, you know, this looks like a, you know, fill in the blank. And therefore there'd be perhaps greater reticence to go for something that looks like that.
I think we have to wait for, you know, the old skeptics like yourself to stop buying cars, and it'll be a young hip generation like myself that will, you know, take this into the future.
This is after hours, so I can call bullshit on that.
Well, you know, look, the most efficient, space efficient design you can get is the one box design, just one box. And, you know, minivans are probably the closest to that, or commercial vans the closest to it. They still have a little nose on them. But if you guys remember William Stout's Scarab from the 1930s, that's probably more along the lines of what you're all talking about. It's not exactly a new form language because it goes back to the 1930s, but it uses all of the available space within the smallest possible body, even though the body was large. And, you couple that with the batteries in the floor or fuel cell integrated into the floor with hub motors and full Guardian technology, that's when things could get really interesting.
Or you could just have a Toyota Previa. Remember that?
Yeah, right. But the Previa had terrible crash characteristics.
Time has moved on, John, and Toyota's developed that Guardian technology. So
they did. But remember, with the Previa, you were sitting on top of the front axle, and your feet were actually in front of the front axle. And I remember Hal Sperlich, a name from the past, said, "Boy, you're the first one to the accident."
There'll be no accidents. We've already established that.
That's right.
So Tesla has been mentioned. So we've got to bring this up, that there's been some social media reports that, Model Ys are not hanging together so well. And Jason, is this just internet chaff, or is this perhaps real stuff?
Well, Gary, why don't you call up Tesla's PR department and ask them that question?
Well,
there was an announcement this week that they no longer have a public relations department, so that's impossible, and it's sort of an indication of how that company runs, unlike any other automotive company, and I'm not saying that in a positive way.
Well, couldn't this just be, Elon's cleverness that, okay, here we are talking about this, right? And nobody had to basically feed us the story. And so he's getting publicity and he's not paying any salaries for that.
Is cleverness a synonym for arrogance? Because I don't think so.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to go in and confirm or deny the story that we've heard from Electra, that's an electric car and alternative transportation site, is that the roof of a Model Y flew off soon after delivery, and the owners luckily were not injured. They were able to return to the service center where the car still sits now, and they're trying to figure out, why did that glass roof fly off? Well, that's a good question. Why did that glass roof fly off? Who's going to answer that question? We'll never know.
Yeah, that's a serious defect. How do you get out of the assembly plant with, I'm assuming they bond it in. It's got to be a structural adhesive, right, that holds that in. How that could get out of the plant without the roof being properly attached is amazing.
Well, we don't know, was it a manufacturing issue on that particular vehicle, or is it a flaw in their manufacturing process that this might happen again and again? Well, let's put a few more cars out on the road and see what happens.
It'd be interesting to see, because even though they got rid of their public relations department, there's got to be somebody at the company that can handle questions like that. I'm assuming now it's going to go through investor relations. If I'm an investor, I want to know what the hell are these cars safe or not?
I'll tell you what department it's going to go through. It's going to go through the legal department, because they are going to get their can I say asses sued off?
No, you can't say that.
I can't say that.
No.
Yeah.
So John, you did that show on Battery Day when they introduced the 4680 cell, and it seemed like that was going to be a long time in the future. And Musk said this week that next year it'll be in the Berlin plant.
Yeah, look, I mean, we know that Tesla moves fast. During the Battery Day, though, they said that there were still a lot of things that they had to get resolved from a manufacturing standpoint of the batteries. And, he talked about a totally new way of doing it. I'm not a battery expert. Go back and listen to Bob Gallion or even Sandy Monroe on that show. They explained it more. but they're going to a dry process instead of a wet process. They can shrink the footprint of the battery manufacturing area, something like 60%, something crazy. But my guess is that's not what's going to be happening in Berlin. That, I think, is the parts of this new process that Elon was suggesting might take 2 or 3 years, if everything works perfect for them to be able to use it. So it looks like they'll be able to use their more traditional battery manufacturing process to be able to make these new cells.
I wanted to, can I give proper attribution? The source I was quoting was Electrek with a K. So I apologize to Electrek for calling them Electra.
So you were just riffing on a Buick, I think.
I think so.
Mm-hmm. Just checking.
Yeah.
All right. So John and I have talked about this on the show over the past several weeks. We haven't had the opportunity to ask you this question, but Jason, how do you see the industry going forward in light of COVID? Is it going to be a continued upswing, or do you see there may be some variations in that vector?
Well, I think the first week of November will give us a lot more information about the future direction. I really do think that the election, one way or the other, will give some clarity, and people will be able to make some plans and have some idea about what the political and economic future looks like. We're in a really unprecedentedly unstable time right now where things could go any direction, and I wouldn't be surprised. My hope is that stability returns and that future planning makes sense. I'm seeing anecdotally, I'm seeing my personal opportunities to work in the industry increasing at the moment. I've had I had a very steep downturn beginning in April, and it started turning around in the last 4 to 6 weeks, which is great. I don't know that that's really an indicator for the whole industry, but it's certainly an indicator that people are interested in cars again, and they're starting to think about buying cars again, and I hope that continues, obviously.
Yeah, Gary, how do you see it?
Well, I saw a report this week that Boeing came out and projected a 11% decrease in the planes it would be delivering through 2029. Okay. And it strikes me that if you have things like Boeing saying, we're going to be taking, 10% of these planes are not going to be built, this means there's not going to be a lot of travel. There's not going to be a lot of travel. There's not going to be a lot of car rentals. And over the years, we've always heard, OEMs talking about the difference between retail sales and fleet sales and so on. But you know what? A sale's a sale. And so if your people are traveling by airplane, maybe this is good in terms of more people will be traveling by car. But this is assuming that people have the wherewithal to be able to take vacations and do things like that. The amount of business travel that is existing now is plummeted, which puts huge pressures on the car fleets, the rental car fleets, which is not good because they're not going to buy new cars if they don't need to. People working at home means they don't have to drive to work, or if a family member does have to drive to work and it's been a historic 2-car family, well, maybe you don't need the other car. I think it's really mixed, and the number of people that continue to be unemployed, they're not going to go out and buy cars new or used. I mean, they just don't have the money to do that. So, sort of to Jason's point, I see, yes, that there's going to be, some clarity, come the presidential election, but regardless of which way that goes, I mean, there are still some structural problems that have to be addressed in terms of bringing this economy back.
Yeah, I would balance what you guys said. I agree with you, but I'd also point out that retail sales have been surprisingly strong, especially last month. I mean, those numbers were good to see. And presumably we're going to get a vaccine, sometime next year. The three of us will probably have access to a vaccine. And
not Jason. He's far too young.
I don't know. He may even be an anti-vaxxer for all I know.
No, I'll take it.
But all I'm saying is that, if there's a vaccine, it all works. We all have access to it. Retail sales continue to grow. And this is another important one. We need a second stimulus package. They call it stimulus. I'll call it bailout. I think that's one of the reasons why the U.S. economy has done as well as it has. Is remember, Congress and the Federal Reserve pushed $3 trillion into the economy. We're starting to run out of that money now, and some of the warning signs are going off in terms of employment and GDP growth. But if we get those three things fixed, vaccine, stimulus, and retail sales going, hopefully things will come back to normal sooner than later.
Well, hey, there are three of us. Why don't we divide and conquer? John, you take vaccine. Gary, you take retail sales, and I'll take the other one, whatever that was.
All the money.
The money, I'll take that.
Yeah, convenient.
That's right.
Well, I would just a slight counter to what you just said, John. We go back to what the Mercedes saying, "Hey, we've got to cut this overhead tremendously," and it just seems to me if those guys sitting in Stuttgart saw a nice rosy future ahead, that would have not been an issue. They'd have talked about all these new electric vehicles that they're coming out with, and they'd put a period at the end of that sentence.
No, that's a great point. Look, I don't think we're going back to normal for the reasons that you guys cited. Business travel is going to be way down. I mean, I've talked to a lot of executives in this industry, and they said COVID's woken them up to the fact that there doesn't need to be that much travel. Also, they're all dreaming of shrinking down the office space that they pay so dearly for right now. So, and as you mentioned, Gary, with people working from home, they're not going to be putting as many miles on their cars. Maybe they don't need that second car. So we're not going back to the pre-COVID world, but I think we do have a good shot at getting to a pretty decent world.
We should end on that note before Jason says something.
Yeah.
Just completely.
Yeah, that young
Before I ruin
whippersnapper.
everything.
Hey, Jason, great having you on the show again, man.
Always good to be here. Thanks.
Cool. Real good, Gary. Good
Okay.
seeing you.
All
And we'll just keep on doing this show.
All right. Take care.
Okay. See y'all.
Bye.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.